Sandro,
Hi.
thank you for doing this. How are
Yeah.
you?
Am I?
How are you?
I'm good.
How are
Yeah.
you? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what can I say?
Mm.
This week, I mean, I'm an astrology baddie, so it's
Yeah.
just like full moon in Scorpio. We
I
just had a
feel,
crazy, crazy weekend.
see, this is the thing. Like, I follow you, but I don't understand any of it, and I'm
Yeah.
not an active participant.
Right.
But then I hear things about myself from people, and people are like, "You're sad, and you're like dangerous, and you're like all these things," and I'm like,
Yeah.
Sure."
Yeah.
But also at the same time, I feel like people are really invested in it right now. Like, it's such a big deal. Like, people are dictating. Like, I know you're very actively you're learning it too, which I think is also really cool.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're studying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Totally. Definitely studying and into
Yeah,
like the mystics and all that kind of stuff. And
it's cool.
I love when I hear people say that they're not an active participant in
Yeah.
it because I'm like, oh, well, it's an active participant in you. You know, I just find it so amazing because
It'll be
it's there.
interesting if it's like I feel personally like I'm one of those people that's like it's not a seeing is believing thing, but I feel like if
Hmm.
there like someone can tell me something and then I make a connection to it and I'm like, oh yeah, no, I can understand the value of it
Yeah.
because I can there's like it's fact based, it's evidence based, right?
Right.
Whereas
Yeah.
sometimes for me when it seems so nebulous and so like what is this? I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
No. Yeah. For sure. And I can understand that because I think there's that side of it where it's like, well, this is measurable
yeah,
science. This is where the planets all are. But
yeah.
then when you like you said when you attach it to kind of these broader stroke themes of emotion and
Hmm.
direction of the mind and all
Hmm.
these influences, then it's kind of like, well, how, like, why? But then it's, I guess it's based off of historical recount.
There,
You
I
can be
mean,
like,
it's
oh well, this
existed.
was here
This,
and this was, so maybe, yeah.
but I think that that's what that's interesting because I feel like it's a way like, and you can correct me obviously because this is my ignorance probably speaking, but it's a very pattern based practice, right?
Yeah.
Because that's where it's what you're learning, and but you're learning your own patterns in operating in this world, right?
Right.
Through it, I think in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a good way of sort of framing it. And I think
Yeah,
because it is pattern based and there are certain like cycles
yeah,
that exist, but then because of the way that planets move,
hmm,
and orbits are bigger or smaller,
yeah,
then there's these kind of like nuances to it all
yeah,
and these very unique moments. And that's why it's like, a lot of people that I talk to and that when I talk about astrology, they're like, well, every Sag is not every
different.
Sag can be the same and not every Scorpio can be the same. And it's just like, well, yeah, of course, because like the moment that you were born, the
Yeah,
sky was a very specific thing that will
yeah,
probably never happen again.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
that exact combination of placements will never happen again, and that's why it's so specific.
That's
But
really
and it
interesting.
it dips into this pattern, but it is like very specific. Yeah.
No, you're very right. I mean, I was recently gifted not too long ago my the stars in the sky
Yeah.
at the time of my birth
Oh, cool.
by my sister. But I
Yeah.
also felt like I don't necessarily. I was like, thanks, but also I don't know. Like
Yeah.
I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with this. But she
Right.
was
Right.
very like I feel like she's much more of a believer in this
Cool.
element. But anyway,
Yeah.
we can
Cool.
get lost in astrology today. But
We
here
can. Yeah.
we're talking about like no, I'm kidding. It's all connected. It's all
Yeah.
connected.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you know what? Today was like really for me. What was really exciting about interviewing you was I really wanted to understand a lot about your journey into what it is you do now. So maybe talk to the people about what it is you do,
Hmm.
and then what got you into doing this? Like what
Yeah.
got you into soaps?
Yeah. So I mean, um, yeah, basically soaps, and I'm talking to you, right?
Yeah,
Like not to the
yeah.
camera.
You talk directly to me.
Okay. Talk to the people. Talk to you. Okay. Okay. So yeah, yeah. Basically, so I'm a soap maker,
Yeah,
and now fragrance delver.
yeah.
I'm really diving into sort of fragrance, that whole
It's
world.
we
Yeah.
love that connection.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think you and I have connected
yeah,
deeply in that realm
yeah,
of sort of material.
yeah,
But yeah, no, I think primarily my brand is called Soaps.
yeah.
And bar soap is one of the key products
Hmm.
in the brand, in the offering.
Yeah.
Physical bar soap, so like an actual bar of soap.
Hmm.
I sort of like really short version of the story.
Yeah.
Basically, I started collecting bar soap years and years and years
Okay.
ago. A friend of mine, we were at a grocery store one
Yeah.
day, and basically he went back into the grocery store. He'd forgotten something. He was like, hold the basket, gotta go back in the grocery store. I was like, cool, whatever. I was like probably like 19 or 20. And he was like, comes back with a bar of soap,
Mhm.
and I was like, "Oh, cool, bar soap."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Dude, like what are you using?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, I don't
Not
know."
bar
Like,
soap.
yeah, no, I don't know. I was nothing intentional, you know. And he was kind of like ahead, and he was just sort
Yeah.
of like, "Oh, you got to be using bar soap. You
Yeah.
got to be using natural bar
Yeah.
soap." And I was like, "Okay, whatever." And then so something just kind of like a flip, like a just like switched or a
Mhm.
switch flipped. One of
Flipped.
those.
Mhm.
And so then I was like, "Oh, this is interesting." I started noticing bar soap
Mhm.
in the world. You
Mhm.
know, I was buying records
Yeah.
for a long time as a DJ. Didn't want to buy records anymore. There was this kind of like elitism involved
Mhm.
with like record buying and playing records that I was just like, fuck, I'm not down for that anymore. But I need to collect something.
Yeah.
And bar soap became this kind of like accessible thing. There was like this really neat, packaging element, fragrance element. There was like a degree of accessibility where it was like you could get it at a gas station, or you could go to like a boutique that's like $50 to $100 bars of soap, or like $1 bar of soap, and it was just such a common thing.
Yeah.
And so I started amassing this collection, and then the next kind of like logical evolution was starting to make the bars, like try it out, making it, and then it became this kind of like back burner thing, where I was like, cool, that was dope. I worked with some recipes, but I'd love to kind of explore this more.
Right.
And then again, it was like a back burner thing, back burner thing, back burner thing. I just kind of kept working, doing what I was doing before, experiential design, consulting on stuff, like, and then hit this like crazy level of burnout.
Yeah.
And I, reached onto that back burner and was like, okay, I'm going to stop doing what I'm doing, and I'm just going to I'm going to dive into this thing that I promised myself, and this like craft to kind of discover.
Right.
And so then I dove into it. I spent a couple months really like learning about the process, like how to work with the material, how to craft, really nice feeling bar soap.
Yeah.
And I did that, and there was no sort of like idea to start a brand by any means, but the timing, which it was, this was January 2020,
right?
That I like my soap sabbatical started January 2020. It was supposed to be 2 months long.
Yeah.
I was going to come out of that sabbatical and get into my, installation work that I was doing before. I had a couple of jobs for some like dispensaries that were opening up. One was like a permanent installation, a couple of events.
Okay.
And then the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And the installations were like pausing, and then they were pausing, and then they were pausing, and then they were canceling. And I was like, kind of a relief. I mean, I could use the money, but kind of a relief. But also, no one knows at all what we're up to right now. We're in a pandemic.
Yeah. So like everything was up in the air.
Everything was up in the air. And so then I just kind of, I'm not the type to like twiddle my thumbs too much. I just wanted to keep doing something. And so I just kept making soap. And then I had this idea, well, like I do all of these things for other brands. Why don't I just kind of create a brand that has some sort of umbrella that I can do some fun stuff with, and apply my sort of design aesthetic and my intention into, and then offer a product and then see where I can take it. Yeah. And then, now that's like pretty much my primary thing. Yeah, soap is my primary thing.
But I feel like it's interesting how, even in that evolution, in that journey alone, there's so much learning. Very inadvertently, I feel like maybe in the universe that kind of like led you down this path in some ways.
Yeah.
But also learning about yourself, right? Like actively kind of like forming something that was an interest into something now that is kind of like your mainstay. Like this is what you're doing on a daily basis.
Yeah.
That you're actually passionate about, that you get excited about.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and I think for a lot of people that people are like, oh, I have an idea to do something, but they're not necessarily pursuing that idea. What motivates you the most right now to kind of push yourself to continue, working in the space, but also what pushed you at that time to kind of say that, okay, no, it's definitely, I can do this. I don't have the capability to do this.
Yeah, I mean, those are great questions. I think, and so, now there's this like whole new phase of fascination, and I'll return to that. But I mean, when I was starting, I think there was this kind of like freedom, in essence. There was this ability to really slow down and to lean into this kind of community that I had built for years, in some sort of like creative facet. Like I joke that like I always sold a $20 product, in some way as a creative. I either selling tickets to shows or posters or
Mm-hmm.
T-shirts or merch or music or something. It was like always this thing that was like a
Something.
$20
Mm-hmm.
buy-in, for someone to support what I was up to
Yeah.
creatively. And it was fun, and it was
Yeah.
like, and it worked, to a degree. I was an artist doing what I
Mm-hmm.
could do, and then that turned into more work and other creative ventures. But then when I started making soap, I was like, oh, wow, soap is a $20 product that like everyone can get behind.
Yeah.
And it's a very common thing, but it also was something that, not that it was weird that I got into it, but it was it's interesting. It's interesting for someone, that was like doing what I was doing up until that point, making like underground dance music and all this kind of, and then all of a sudden now I have like a soap brand, but people were down, and they were connecting to it. I think the culmination of like years of aesthetic and choice led to me being able to put together this thing that people resonated with, and that felt really good. There was this immediacy that was really beautiful, that people were consuming the product, they were resonating with it, and they felt really good. And then it was I was making it and it was selling out. I was making it and it was selling out, and there was this connection to community and back and forth, like you're saying, that felt really, really good, and the basis of the project, I was able to kind of continue to evolve the product. I was making batch by batch by batch, and so there was this newness. There was like a foundation, but then a bit of newness that kind of kept me excited and inspired, but still like a trusted thing. It was kind of like, okay, I have this mold, and now I can just tweak it a little bit. And then people were resonating. And then there was this like, the tagline for the brand is impermanent daily ritual. And impermanence is something that I've leaned into for years and years and years. I find it to be such a beautiful thing. Like things are here and they're gone. And, it's like back into the astrology talk. It's like, I'm a Scorpio. It's like the sort of death and rebirth is a big part of my theme,
That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
I think like for me, one thing that's really interesting about even what you've just talked about is the fact that there is an impermanence to all of these elements, and that is the nature of it. And I feel like I drew a lot of connections when you told me that you did experiential work before, in terms of like how you got into soap, because I felt like if you are building experiences for people, and sometimes those experiences are limited in what it is, like people are going to be there for a limited time in a space, and they're going to experience that. In a lot of ways, that's what I feel like the soap is as well, right?
Right.
Like each time, maybe you do come back to the same soap, but it's always an opportunity to try something new.
Yeah.
Each time a soap bar is over, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's like each one can be its own experience, right? Like each one has its own moment, its own sort of like home that you're kind of visiting. And that was one of the things that really drew me to because that's how we actually I came to buy soap from you. But that was what drew me to the soap in the beginning. It was that element of it. There was this idea that you had this very strong branding. I mean, your brand work is like fire, but I think you know this.
Thank you.
But it's also like really, really like, I feel like there is a thought to what this is. And it, for me, at one point, didn't feel like I was buying a bar of soap, right? Like I felt like it's an experience. And, we talk a lot about perfume. That's what perfume is for me, right? Like I think there's anything that's sensory in that way, I think holds memory to it.
Right.
And so when you're using soap or anything that is kind of like more sensory and then it's more scent driven,
right?
There's a memory to your experience with it. So I really appreciated that. So I really liked how you've kind of like talked about that element of it.
Yeah.
But one thing I've also noticed that you talked about is the fact that you gave yourself a space, or like I would say you have created a space where those other elements of your life, in addition to soap, can also live.
Yeah.
Right? Because I feel like at this point, in some ways, they're all connected.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, you're so right. Everything is connected. I think so. Like, what I'm doing with the brand, what I'm doing with all of the things that I do are kind of just like an extension of self, and I feel so grateful that what I put out into the world is that, and it very much is indication of like where I'm at.
Yeah.
I think because the company is it's just me. It's like there's definitely, I have wonderful support and like I'd say a council that I can like speak with and all that kind of stuff, but for the most part it's just me, and so that has its pros and cons, of course, because there isn't it's if I'm doing great, then the company is doing great. If I'm like a bit tired, then the company is tired. All those that's very There's this kind of push pull with it that really
Yeah.
exists, but again, I'm very grateful for, because I'm able to do something that is like extremely authentic to my being. That's just it's just like I keep saying that it's this indication,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
been a theme that I've been talking about in the recent months, is
Right.
this idea of indicators in our life.
Yeah.
And so the brand is me sort of diving into what I find really
Mm.
fascinating and interesting. And I had this talk one time about, like, what is the brand about,
Yeah.
and is it about like healing, or is it about like like certain levels of products? And we kind of distilled it down to it's around this idea of wellness.
Yeah.
I think wellness means something. Everyone I think everyone wants wellness in their life. Like it's like in the word, like you want to be well.
Yeah,
It's like we all
100%.
want it, but it also looks different for everyone. And I
Yes.
think, but
Yes.
we can learn in beautiful ways from each other's sort of dive or delve
Yeah.
into what that means for them. And for me, like you talked about there with scent and memory and experience, those are all really key parts of our wellness in the way that
Right.
we experience the world around us.
Yeah.
And because I am experiencing my world and then being able to make a product that people connect with in an impermanent way,
Yeah.
in an impermanent cycle. They use a bar of soap, or they use a fragrance, or incense is coming, for example, and that's burning. Yeah, yeah, it's ready. That stuff, it comes and goes,
Yeah.
and is a part of like a very intimate level of wellness,
Yeah.
and so for me to be able to make something, learn, and then apply it, and then put it out into the market or into the world, it's just this amazing transfer of energy.
Yeah.
And a constant transfer of energy.
Which is really cool. I feel like that, even that cycle that you're talking a lot about, when you're seeing other people like respond to your work in this way, or getting to know you in this way, and then offering people something, I feel like in so many ways that maybe that they're feeling like makes them feel better or changes their being in some way. I think that that's really neat to be able to do that. Is that part of what motivates you to continue doing this, and what motivates you to sort of grow even out of this, right? 'Cause I feel like from when I met you, there's a lot of like change, right? Like there's been a lot of change even in terms of what the brand is, but also where your interests lie. So what pushes you to and motivates you to kind of like grow beyond what this is?
Yeah. I think, again, amazing question. And I think growth and scaling, especially in business,
Yeah.
is this really, like, there's this like we dance on this edge, of what is a business?
Yeah.
Like, what are we trying to do here? Like,
Yeah.
yes, of course, like there's some level of commerce. We're like bringing in energy, whether that's money or attention or whatever it is. We're harvesting that through what we're doing, the service we're providing. There's a certain level at which we can exist, and then of course there's always room for growth. There's always room to pull back. It's like it's something to be really careful with. And I think because of past experience, I've learned, and I've had opportunity to grow at different varying degrees of pace or cadence. And so I am extremely mindful of, okay, this is how fast I want to go. I've had, the business is now, I guess it's now I'm in my like technically fourth year or whatever, or third, I guess I'd say like 3+ years.
4 years is a long time.
Yeah, thank you. And so it's now in that stage where I'm like, okay, I've had some amazing learning moments. Last year was amazing for learning moments, spending money and being like, okay, maybe I should have done that, and scaled in ways that maybe just didn't make sense, But I think now, there's a certain degree of retail clients, there's my direct to consumer clients, and then there's my own fascination. It's like the people that are buying the product, of course, they're an inspiration. I want to continue to make a product for those people, and people that are going to find out about the sort of stream. And then beyond that, there's my own artistic fascination, which is, and I think it's all connected to, I've worked on music for years. Composing with scent is very similar in terms of composing with music, and in terms of from like a technical standpoint, or a artistic standpoint, in building this kind of like stories, and how we can apply that to things that convey those things, like whether and where people can experience it for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a very expansive world there.
Yeah.
Like we can work with installation, we can work with um, again, single-use products. We
Yeah.
can use, like, there's just so much room to play there,
Yeah.
and there's so much room to play there in terms of working on my own
Mm-hmm.
as a artist or individual,
Yeah.
but then also bringing other people into the fold and now starting to collaborate
Mm-hmm.
and blend ideas, whether it's we're working in the lab together or someone's across the world and
Mm-hmm.
they have an idea and they want to execute something and they want to talk about packaging, and
Yeah.
then we, and so there's all of this room to work with people
Yeah.
and to experience things together
Yeah.
and try things out, and I think for me, I am constantly fascinated with, I'm always learning about the human body, connection to spirit, our mind, all these things.
Yeah.
And I think these things that we dance around in wellness tend to provoke those things.
Right.
And so when I'm learning more about them, it's like even things like supplements like magnesium, like, like there's just so many things that we can play with in this space that pique my interest and are within reach to kind of play with and then create an offering.
Which is really nice. I feel like it's also you kind of like just assessing kind of what you've even done and then kind of growing from that as well, which I really love. And I think this is going to sound like a more technical question because I feel like I work in data in the day, and then this is something that I get a lot of business owners talk to me about.
Yeah.
But how much of what it is you do is driven by the data or like what you're seeing? Are you using any of that to drive any of your decision making, or is a lot of it just driven by your intuition, like you feeling a certain way or you wanting to do something?
Feeling and wanting.
Yeah.
I'd say like 99% feeling and wanting.
Yeah.
And then I definitely do respond, because I've got amazing retail clients and placements in shops, for example. And they'll give me feedback and say, oh, this batch works really well, or this product works really well. And so, I think, as I said, like when I was developing the brand, doing this sort of batch by batch basis, that was very much just a feeling thing, you know? And then all of a sudden I had to respond to, being in retail spaces and them wanting to rebuy something.
Yeah.
And I would be like, well, I had this feeling that I was only going to make that once. And then they would be like, no. Oh, well, we want that again. It sold really well.
Yeah.
And I had to rework things. Yeah. And then there, became this response based off of, okay, now I have to make like a line of mainstays, for example, that kept, recreating them, kept and being in the line in like the offering,
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's very much kind of this, I'm restocking as well as just constant development. Yeah. And then, I just recently dropped a fragrance with a label out of Montreal, and those, they hit me up, they're friends of mine. They asked me to sort of compose a fragrance based off of an album, and its specific artwork, and then some notes from their reference. And, and it was a long project, and like, it was something that we worked on, and they were, they knew that it was kind of like an early thing for me too. And I'd worked on this thing, and then we put this fragrance out, and was this amazing, extremely fulfilling project that, again, was based off of feeling and emotion and connection to the material, and so, there's this, it's a lot of feeling.
No, I feel like, what I think I personally feel, especially when I look, and I'm speaking as if I'm like examining business owners all the time, but and I examine businesses all the time. I feel one thing that's really interesting to me is that when you do lead with emotion, I think there's an authenticity to what you're doing, right? Like, I don't think you're coming in from a mindset of a commercial mindset, which sometimes I think for certain businesses works. Yeah. But I think when you are dealing with something that is in the wellness space, that is also so tied to personal experience, I don't think, you could be as metered with like going in and saying this is what the numbers are saying, this is what's right? Like, I think you have to feel it through. I also think, like, from a story standpoint, I think it also feels more relevant to what it is you do, that you do act with emotion. And also I feel like it feels truer to who you are too, that you're acting through emotion, right?
Right.
I feel like that's as long as I've known you, that's how you operate, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's really fascinating to hear, because I feel like a lot of business owners would have been like, no, there's a number thing, and then it's like, we do a bunch of math in the back, and then we figure this out. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that's not compelling. One thing I also really liked is that you talked a little bit about the fact that you are almost at a stage where you can say DJing on one side, soaps on one side,
Mm-hmm.
something else on the other side,
Mm-hmm.
right? Do you actually have to compartmentalize your day to day in order to kind of give attention to all those things? Or how do you actually kind of make sure that, you're feeding yourself in terms of like, I'm feeling like I'm fed in my exposure to all of these elements,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm also like being respectful of the fact that like other people are going to be like reliant on me producing something.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and that's it, it's a dance.
Yeah.
It's very much a dance, and it's something that I'm learning
Mm.
more and more about,
Mhm.
because so much of my career has been sort of gig focused
Yeah.
or gig oriented.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of personal growth over many years, of course, but it's just
Mhm.
that was leaning into kind of being a yes person
Yeah.
and being like, oh my God, like I just saying yes to everything for either out of insecurity or an idea of
Yeah.
lack or something like that, and
Yeah.
being like, oh my God, I have to say yes, otherwise things aren't going to show up
Mhm.
anymore. And it's wild what happens when we start saying no.
Yeah.
And it's such an amazing thing, developing boundaries and all that kind of stuff. And so now I'm really lucky and really grateful. Luck is one side.
Right.
I do believe in sort of like the kind hand of the
Yeah.
universe, I suppose. But I think we do a lot of work to
Yeah.
sort of steer the ship,
Yeah.
and to learn and to integrate. And so now I have such a cool daily practice, where I do get to sort of pour energy into these different things that I quite like, and
Right.
I'm doing, I would say, less than I was in the past, but with more focus and attention. And I'm resting a lot more. I'm
Yeah.
just treating my body better.
Yeah.
And so that, I think with music, for example, when I was coming up in music, every waking moment, like every moment that I could, I'd be staying up hours and hours and hours to like make music and
Yeah.
to like hopefully make something and hopefully do something. Like I was just
Yeah.
like really ripping at it.
Right.
And which I'm grateful that I did. I'm
Yeah.
grateful that I did that back in the
Right.
day. But now I don't need to do that.
Right.
Now I have these techniques and different ways, like the foundation is there. So when the time is right and I need to jump into music and where technology is, I can spend an hour or 3 hours or whatever and make material that feels good to me,
Right.
not to say it's just a masterpiece and before it wasn't or whatever, like it's not that, but it's just now the way that
It's
I can use my
different.
time, it's different.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit more intentional. And so I can be, I can hold a couple things.
I like that use of the word intentional, because I feel like, yeah, there's a difference between creating and creating in the madness of creating.
Yeah.
Just producing because you're feeling like I want to produce things and it's in my mind all the time. And then creating with intention, right? Like actually telling yourself that there's a reason or there's a purpose for me to be here creating.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily have to be tied to anything, nothing reward based, I would say, but more from an internal satisfaction standpoint. Like,
Yeah.
I'm here to make something that I know will be good, that will be worthwhile, that's worth this time that I'm now going to spend on it.
Yeah.
That will make me happy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And oftentimes it's just if you say you want to make something,
Yeah.
it's like like it can be anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Literally
it doesn't have to be
anything.
amazing. Just as long as if you say that you want to make something,
Yeah.
and then all you have to do is just make something.
Oh, 100%.
And then that's really it, like karmically or energetically or whatever. And that's what I've been finding a lot recently too, is just that, with my word, I'm trying to be honorable or authentic, where if I say I'm going to do something, I do the thing.
Yeah.
So there isn't this kind of like loose cord flying around all over the place.
Which makes a lot of sense. I feel like, yeah, you're kind of, and I think you're learning a lot about yourself through this process. I feel like you're kind of getting better.
Yeah.
You're also evolving, right? As a creator, I think like now you couldn't say that you would be creating the same way you did when you had first started this in any way.
Right.
Like you're a different person in
Yeah.
so many ways.
Oh yeah, for sure. Super different.
Would you, when it comes to you being now like someone that owns your own business, works for yourself, does things for yourself, if you had to sort of encapsulate that like in a phrase or in a sentence or in a paragraph, even it could be, but how would you describe that for yourself?
I think, yeah, that's an interesting one. I think, to try and keep it short, I would say, develop trust in self, try and be authentic, be gentle, and understand that you are evolving and learning as you go, and I think those are the keys.
Yeah.
Like, do something that you really either do something like you can just do something that makes money. Like that's totally fine. I think it's so fine to
get the bag,
to just get the bag, get the bag. And, if you can like find a really good way to get the bag so that you can be on the beach all the time, if that's what you love doing, that's totally fine too. That's really good. But as someone like myself that is, I want to be doing something of service, I want to be sort of being involved with some sort of level of community or helping or something like that. I have my own expression as well as this connection to people.
Yeah.
It's just, as long as I can stay true to those values,
right.
And while maintaining that gentle nature.
Yeah.
Like, don't be so hard on yourself. Like, really find a unit of measure that's realistic,
I really like that you keep going back to the gentleness of this. And it's interesting because I was having a very interesting conversation with my therapist very early this week about that term.
Yeah.
But you're not necessarily just referring to gentleness. When you talked about it earlier, you're like, be gentle in how you're going into it, but you mean be gentle to yourself, be gentle to the people around you, I'm assuming, as well, and gentle in your existence, I guess, in this world as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, totally. The world can present many things.
Yeah.
And many of them, we see so much rigidity, we see so much aggression, we see so much, but I think in our nature, of course, there's room for, being about it and being like confidently about it and like, strong and courageous, but we can also hold those values in being very loving and gentle and, turning inward and looking at what do we need, what do the people around us need, and how can we listen more, how can we develop more compassion or more empathy for, again, people around us, but in a big way ourselves. We are like, the world around us reflects our state of being and our vision, and we're in community, and I think we can lean on each other as much as we can. We need to lean on ourselves as individual, but it's one of those things where, I really, really think that it's so necessary to sort of like tap into that divine feminine energy and be like, okay, be a bit more honoring of self and, give yourself credit for where you are and how 100%. Far you've come. It's like, we're sitting, like, what a fucking miracle. Like, we are just these weird beings on this planet, and like, that's wild to me. It's like such a wild thing, and somehow we made it, and we still are continuing to do this thing.
To do it. I know.
And so, like, what a miracle, and I think we often forget to give ourselves a pat on the back.
I think so, and I think like that's you are always like ready to thank everyone but yourself for existing sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's so easy to be like, oh, my doctor did all of this work, and I'm like, but also I put in the work too.
Yeah, they just told you that they told you what to do, and you did it. You're the one who did it.
Yeah. Who else was doing all of this, right?
Yeah.
So I feel you 100%.
Yeah.
If you had to leave people with something, like, to kind of like remind people of as a whole, what would that be?
In terms of business or just in general?
No, it doesn't have to be business related. In general.
I think, again, that's sort of like, I always try to, it sounds so cheesy or whatever, but I always hear Jimi Hendrix in the back of my mind asking us all if we're experienced, and I think that is a very interesting thing is, and I when I was younger, I had, some, like, let's say elder that would teach about, life and how life is offering us all sorts of levels of experience, and it's up to us to choose what to do with those experiences.
Right.
And I think it's, fear can slow us down. It's not completely, it shouldn't be completely abolished. I think fear is a necessary tool in our, like, navigation of the world, but I think we should try and face our fears, gain experience, communicate about those experiences with others, communicate again, everything I say that has to do with others also involves
yourself.
self. It's
Yeah.
like, get a journal,
Yeah.
you know, try and reflect as much as possible.
Yeah.
Experience things in the world and reflect on those experiences that you've
I
had.
love that.
And I think that's the key, you know. And then if you can do those things, everything that you do will gain further perspective and more awareness.
I think so. And I feel like you're 100% right. And, you know, I think everything is an experience and it's there to teach you something. I think it's what you're taking out of it.
Mhm.
And even when it's bad, I feel like, I mean, I always have to remind myself, even when it's the worst that it could possibly be,
Yeah.
is that it's an experience of something that's so awful. But the reality is the value in it is really the lesson that you're getting out of it, but also how you're going to grow out of this, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like you're very right. Like those things kind of fashion you in a different way, fear, you know, feelings of insecurity, all those elements, right?
Mhm.
So I think that, yeah, you do need those things to kind of like whittle you down into the better being that you could be.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, totally.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, where can people find you?
Find me on Instagram.
It's good. You should follow him. He's now talking a lot about
Yeah.
he's talking a lot about astrology.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. It's funny because, like, I mean, I am Scorpio through and through. It's like, and so I've been a bit like secretive for a long time. I was also, you know, I mean, yeah, for many reasons that I'll talk about more on the Instagrams and stuff. But I was a bit more like behind closed doors, and, like, you know, and I think just recently, because I've been digging into certain levels of, like, you know, I'm really into tarot, really into astrology, other forms of sort of speaking and universal energy, I suppose. And I had a session with a friend of mine. She does some her form of therapy, and she was like, "Oh, this might be something cool for you to lean into." And again, it just planted a seed, and then all of a sudden, I just felt this kind of like nudge to express myself, you know, on the platform, and
which is
to share.
great.
And because I think we should be doing,
you should be doing it.
Yeah, it's like,
I feel like you have a lot to teach people.
I think there is potential.
No, there is.
Yeah, and I'm really like leaning into it, and I'm really enjoying it, and I'm just being vulnerable, and I think it's just fun to do. And so you can like Instagram. It's just like Sandro _ SP. I'm sure we'll tag it in this. And then my DJ stuff is Sergio SP. The soap is soaps with 2 extra S's on the front. And then the space that we're in is called Givennroomm. And so it's given with 2 N's and room with 2 M's. So those are the main things.
Amazing. I always feel enlightened talking to you. I'm glad we did this in some capacity. We'll probably do another one at a different point in time when you've become like a little bit more like ready to talk more openly about everything.
Yeah, of course.
Through this real journey.
Yeah.
But no, it was such a pleasure. It was always such a pleasure.
Yeah, likewise.